was talking to somebody recently, and I said, how'd you do it? Because I've got 42 minutes. I've recorded this 8 times. I've got 42 minutes before I go and pick up the kids. And I love it. So I love my life. I get up, go to work, come home, pick the kids up, blah, 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 blah. Everything is on the go. And this couple do a podcast, and she's put out God knows how many of these casts. And she's done really, really well. And he works, and she looks after the kids. He comes home, he looks after the kids. And they've got 3 children. They're a constant juggle. And I have no idea how they find the time. But I had another conversation with somebody shortly after. And she was talking about writing a book and how difficult she finds it. And honestly, with anything, whether it's the podcasting, like now I've got 40 odd minutes, or whether it's the book, if you want to do it, you're going to do it. You're going to find time, create time, manifest time, whatever it is. You're going to sit down and you're going to go, you know what, this might be hard work, but I'm going to get it done. And in the first chapters of Checkmate on this podcast, Killers from Crime, I started off by complaining and saying, that's it, I'm done, I'm not doing any more casts, it's too much hard work, I haven't got the time, and it brings back so many memories, and yada yada yada. And it's true, but the truth is, sometimes I just put too much in place and I don't have the time, and something's got to give. So what's been given recently has been the podcast, so I've not had the time. I need to sort that out, prioritise it in a different way maybe, and go from there. I don't think for a minute I'm ever going to have one of these websites where you pay monthly, or you want to listen to me spout off every week, or on a radio station or anything like that. That's not my goal, that's not my end game. My end game is literally information out there, review my books, buy my books. That's what I want, because that's my mother's history, that's my mother's name. And as much as people have said, oh, you don't want her to die, no, let's be realistic, she's already dead. She was dead probably within 10 minutes after she was stabbed to death. She would have choked to death on her own blood. That's a horrible truth, and a truth that a lot of people don't like. Oh, you say it so grossly and so directly, and how can you not feel any emotion about it? Oh, trust me, I've had the years of feeling all the emotion about it. I've had the years of worrying and problems and nightmares and everything else. It's a matter of fact. It is what it is. There was an Ally McBeal episode where John Cage kept describing on this case about how a plane crashed, and they were trying to sue the airline company, and he said something like res ipsa loquitur, and he kept going on res ipsa loquitur throughout this whole episode. It was saying the thing speaks for itself, and that's what it is now. She was killed and she's gone, but the books, they allow that story to continue, and her life allows my life, my brothers, my 2 sisters to continue, and their children to continue. And so you never know, maybe in a few years' time you'll have stories about them. But right now, what you've got is the notion, if you believe in synchronicity, psychic awareness, fate, spirituality, faith, or any other gubbins, then you're thinking about writing a book. This is your message, this is your sign, this is your stars in alignment, this is your Sagittarius, Aries, horoscopes fall into place, this is your palmistry ticket, your lifeline, or whatever it may be that you happen to believe in. Go and write the damn book. Not because I believe in any of that crap, I don't, regardless of what it says in these books. I did at some point. Excuse me. And I still jump between having a very strong faith and having none whatsoever. I'm human sometimes. Sometimes I'm confused. Not like that. However, I'm not confused about personal progression. I'm not confused about personal discovery. If there's something you're not getting past, you think writing a book's going to help you do that, go and write a book. It's important. It's been there for a long, long time. That's your sign. Go and write a book. That book needs to be written for nobody else but you. Then write the book. And we'll carry on with Checkmate whilst I have 30 odd minutes remaining. Checkmate, chapter 5. Oh, before we start, my eldest and my youngest went to school book day today. My eldest went as Wednesday Addams. She's not seen it yet, she's not allowed. There's some quite dodgy bits in it, and she's not old enough yet. It's a 12, she's 9. I don't really care about the age rating thing, but I do care about a couple of bits of too graphic for her. She's great, but she's a bit of a wimp sometimes. So we can't let her, but she looked almost identical, and she put the walk on all through the yard. It was absolutely hilarious, I loved it. And my youngest went as, I don't want to say Merridell because that's the wrong word, because Merridell's the archery one and that's not one. The girl from Encanto, I think on Meribel, something like that, the girl from Encanto with the green glasses and no powers whatsoever. She went as her, and she looked so cute. It's absolutely awesome. So yeah, as much as this is a very depressing at times and survival podcast, when it comes to my own works, there's some really, really positive stuff in there, and that's where this is going to lead at some point, because I'm not going to sit here just doing my book stuff. Not when there's so much love in the world, and there really is. As you can tell by my two cockatiels going at it in the background. Chapter 5, Checkmate. The house was a 3-bedroom semi hidden behind a large hedge. I liked that it couldn't be seen from the roadside. I walked in with Patrick and was led into the living room by George. He was tall and thin with an edge of caution about him. He was reading me from the get-go, but wasn't intrusive or abrasive with it. Stephanie was in the living room, upstairs playing with her fingers. She looked a little nervous. George's hair was slicked back and light. He wore jeans and a cowboy-style shirt with brown shoes. Stephanie was nearly as tall, but appeared shorter, as though gravity was doing her no favours. She had dark hair in a bob. I noticed George's eyes were friendly, even though his face was on edge. I felt he wanted to keep me at arm's length for a while. He stuck his hand out. "I'm George. Call me whatever you like, but I like George," he said, smiling. I looked at Pat and shook George's hand. It was soft. Stephanie stepped forwards. "Stephanie," she said, her eyes briefly hitting mine, then darting around the room and settling on her hands again. What had they been told, I wondered. "Questions?" Pat asked me. "Well, hi, I'm Tracie," I said, glancing at Stephanie, and then meeting George's eyes and sitting down on the sofa, as George has indicated. "I'm sure Stephanie and George will tell me. I did think it was better for me if the ball was in their court, and at least I knew them better than they knew me." Stephanie stepped up. "Okay, we know you want space, but we haven't been told much about you. You have your own room." Stephanie ran through what Patrick and I had agreed, and then she added, "We eat at the table, but it's not essential. You don't have to join us. If you're in when we are, we'll offer to make you something. Otherwise, it's up to you to help yourself. No food or drink upstairs, but kitchen, garden and dining room is fine with us, isn't it, George?" she said. He nodded. I had no reason to dislike them, and my feet were throbbing. "I need a bath, guys. Can I see the room?" They showed me up the stairs, and it was perfect. A single bed with a duvet, bedside cabinet, a wardrobe, a small desk with a PC chair by it, and it was fully carpeted, with clean windows. Yeah, I could get used to this, I thought. Well, I just found the spelling error. I am not happy one little bit. That should have said, "We'll knock every morning, but otherwise won't disturb you unless it says it's okay to come in." It actually says, "We'll known every morning." Oh, how many people have edited this and I've still not found a... Oh. Okay, I apologise in advance, and this will be corrected forthwith. There you go, only an Englishman can say forthwith and make it sound extraordinarily posh. Okay, "We'll knock every morning, but otherwise won't disturb you unless you say it's okay to come in. You're responsible for keeping the room clean and tidy, and that's how you earn pocket money. You don't need to do more than that. But if you do help out, we'll give you more," George said. Money, I thought. Wow, I was impressed. "How much did you get before?" George asked. £2.50 a week when I got into care, and then it went up to £3.50 a week when I left. But later on I got a paper round, so I had £7.50 a week for that too," I replied. "I think we can stretch to £5 a week for doing your room then," George said. I went back downstairs with them and took my place on the sofa. "Questions for Tracie?" Patrick asked. "Do you think you could like it here?" Stephanie asked, throwing me completely off guard. It was the first time I'd heard a genuine question about my happiness. "Or at least stay here until you're old enough to get your own place, or whatever you decide to do," she added. She'd mistaken my shock for concern. I hadn't thought that far ahead, and I stayed quiet. But I'd never appreciated a question more in my life. They genuinely wanted to know if I could be happy there, and that's all that was important to them. We don't want you to run away, but we won't stop you either. If you're unhappy, please do tell us," she added. I liked her. "Today everything is perfect. You seem good people. But tomorrow, who knows? I can't make you promises, I'm sorry," I said. "That's a man's answer. I like that. You'll be just fine, lad," George said, leaning forward on his arms. I liked him too. "Do you smoke?" Stephanie asked me with no trace of animosity in her voice. I looked at Patrick, who nodded. "Yeah, I smoke," I said. "So do we, and we smoke outside in the garden only. Overnight your cigarettes go on the windowsill with ours. We won't touch them, and appreciate you don't touch ours either," she said. Had I just been told I could smoke in the garden? "Sorry?" I asked. "You smoke in the garden? No fags upstairs," George said. I turned to Patrick. "You can go, these guys are sound," I told him. Stephanie's head lifted up a little, and George let out a little laugh. "Told you," Patrick said, heading to the door. I followed him. "Patrick," I called, hobbling behind him. "They do seem genuine. They probably are. Thanks. At the same time, I meant what I said. Any shit, mate, and I'm off." He nodded. I went in and got upstairs to sort my feet out. George gave me a pair of socks until I got some the next day. I stood barefoot with him outside as he sat on a bench, not to tower over me. "Smoke?" he asked, offering me one of his. I pulled my tobacco out and made one up myself. During the next 2 weeks, Stephanie and George kept their word. I grew to like and respect them. They were honest people. As long as I was honest with them, they were to me. They kitted me out with school clothes and my own. This time I was asked what I liked. It wasn't like anywhere else where the items were just bought and you were expected to accept everything. There was another girl there who was only young and stayed during the day. I didn't talk to her, nor her to me. During a chat with Stephanie, she asked me, "Do you feel comfortable with me, Trace?" "Yeah, why?" I asked her, stepping back. I didn't think she was about to go sicko on me, but I'd learnt the hard way. When people start asking emotional questions, it's usually safe to put some distance between them and myself. "I think people might be wrong about you, you know," she said curiously. "You mean Patrick? What's he said?" "Let me tell you, Patrick knows what I want him to know, nothing more." "We were told you didn't relate well to women. You saw them as a threat. Do you feel threatened by me?" she asked me genuinely. "No, Stephanie," I said, laughing. "The two previous female carers I had, let's say they weren't good. They weren't like you guys. One ran the house like a sergeant, didn't have any time for anyone. It was all fake. It was her way or no way. We didn't get along. The other? Well, she'd lost a kid, and it turned her head. She wanted me to replace him, and well, I can't, you know?" I said, realising that she was the first person since Nigel I'd been honest with. "My turn," I said. "How do you guys feel about me?" "You're alright, we like you," she said. "And George?" I asked. "Yeah, him too. George is George. You'll have to ask him," she told me. "Thanks," I said. "What for?" she asked. "Being honest," I replied, heading to the kitchen. I was trying to make sure she couldn't see my face. I was about 4 seconds from crying. I wanted to stay. They were good people who treated me right. Why hadn't I been put here first, I thought, with a combination of anger and numbness, at being so used to anger and the pointlessness of it all running through me. Every morning I'd come downstairs and George would be setting the table. He'd always say morning. I would reply and head out for a smoke. He'd always join me for one after he'd made a brew, and then I'd go into the kitchen and make breakfast whilst they ate at the table. It was still too much like a family for me to be able to eat with them. I'd watch them sometimes eating together. Stephanie would sit by the window, and George opposite her as one of the girls would be sat facing the window, on the longer side of a narrow table. Sometimes they would talk, but often they sat in peaceful silence and just ate. It was beautiful. I longed to be a part of that lifestyle. I'd start to reminisce and pretend Stephanie was Mum, and George was still George, but he was my George, and not like Wenzel at all. And I was where the girl was sat, and it was all perfect, like the garden outside. But then it hurt because it was fake and bullshit and never gonna happen, and so I'd walk away. One morning after our ritual smoke, I noticed George had put some bags I hadn't seen out before in the garden. "What do you want done?" I asked him. "Well, you don't have to help, but if you want you can," he asked me. The tasks were general gardening work usually, weeding, hedge trimming, edging and the like, although one day I woke up to there being a noisy van on our drive. I thought there was a problem, because in Macclesfield a van outside usually meant a load of people were getting out and someone was getting a slap. I flew downstairs and my protective nature came out against my will. "George, you alright? What's going on?" I said. I was eyeing the van driver suspiciously. "Moving these. You can help if you want, but you don't have to," George told me. I was listening, but I was busy looking into the cab of the truck. I wanted to know who else was around, and if someone was parked outside, was they connected with Wenzel? Nobody was there. It was just how my mind was working. "You don't have to," I caught again as George repeated himself. I spent the next hour moving slabs to the back garden and telling myself over and over, "It's safe here, it's not Macclesfield." I helped George lay his patio that day and thoroughly enjoyed the manual labour and feeling as though I was making a difference for both George and Stephanie. It was getting cooler as George handed me a £20 note. "I don't want that," I said. I'm doing this," I added, waving around like a fish out of water, indicating the whole garden. "Because I want to," I said. George smiled. "Take it anyway," he said. That's the type of people they were. Good people. I called Patrick to arrange contact. No luck. Caroline said she'd see me at school, and Joth and Jodie weren't interested because I could still be in touch with Wenzel. I explained to Patrick I wasn't, but they were having none of it. I am so sorry. That is my two birds going at it, so you're going to have to wait about 15 seconds for it to be finished, and I will continue Checkmate. Okay, so I think they've finished. Almost. Let's try again. I called Patrick to arrange contact. No luck. Caroline says she'd see me at school, and Joth and Jodie weren't interested because I could still be in touch with Wenzel. I explained to Patrick I wasn't, but they were having none of it. I was convinced Joth and Jodie wanted nothing to do with me, and that for some reason I was to blame for what Wenzel had done with my mum. I was also convinced Caroline plain hated me for leaving Brenda's. "I want my stuff from Wenzel's," I told Patrick. He said he'd call him. "He's not to know where I am," I told him. "We can't stop him." "He's your dad," Patrick told me. "He finds out I leave, your choice," I fired back. He promised not to say, and would get back to me later in the day. I spent the next few hours smoking on the bench in the garden, and imagining what it would be like to belong to a family like Stephanie and George's, where they didn't have any of the bullshit I was used to living through. Or what it would be like to be Louise for a day. Would I turn to drink like she had? Or would I just fuck off and be done with it? Perhaps I'd love it because I'd seen the things I'd seen. I didn't know. I just knew whilst I was thinking about other people, I wasn't concentrating on the things I was going through. And I definitely wasn't waiting for a call from Pat to tell me my father hated me, and my family couldn't give a toss. George had called me from somewhere in the house as I'd received a phone call. It was Patrick. He said he'll only talk to you, Pat told me regarding Wenzel. I called Wenzel straight away. "What do you want?" he said. "Patrick said you'd already talk to me. I want my stuff." I could hear him take an inhale of cigarette and heard the click as it lit up, and he breathed in quickly. "That's right, you snivelling shit. You want your stuff?" He'd thrown his lighter on the side in the kitchen. I heard it click. "Who do you think you are? You were a mistake when you were born. You're all mistakes. After all I've done for you," he sneered. I hung up and waited 30 seconds. I needed time to digest that. I knew he'd be an arse. I knew he'd be angry. But I didn't realise he'd actually tell the truth. And he was totally telling the truth. In his mind we were all mistakes. I wasn't angry that he'd called me a mistake. I knew that Mother loved her, so I knew I was loved by my nan and granddad. I knew Wenzel wasn't a decent parent and really didn't care about me, and that was fine. That I was getting used to. But to call my brother and sister mistakes, that hurt me in ways I didn't realise I could feel. I was becoming defensive. I was on the brink of a destructive path anyway. It made more sense for me to hang up. Besides, I wasn't going to let him know he could get to me. He knew the buttons to push, but I knew how he thinks, and when he feels in control he gets a sexual buzz from it. There was no way I was giving him that satisfaction. I counted to 30, called him back. "Did you just fucking hang up on me?" he stormed. I laughed, part nerves, part fuck it, I hope his head explodes. "You've got my keys. When I get my keys, you get your stuff. Got it?" he shouted. He cut me off. I called Patrick and explained the conversation. "What now?" he asked. "Let him cool off and then you call him. Tell him his attitude is abusive. I'm happy where I am. He can happily have his keys when I get my stuff. When it's delivered. Till then, they're my keys." Pat promised to sort it. I'd actually forgot I had them until then. That's what it got me thinking though. Why was he so worried about his keys? What exactly was he afraid of? That's the end of chapter 5. I still have a little bit of time. Yay. How long's chapter 6? Let's go. Okay. I turned pretty dark in this next chapter. It's not a thing I was proud of. And I actually had a guy sort of talk to me one time about it in a manner where they thought it might have been like a childhood thing where two kids argue and one goes, I'm going to kill you, and the other one goes, I'm going to kill you first, and the other one goes, I'm going to kill you more, I'm going to stab you 8 times, and the other one's like, well, I'm going to shoot you, and you go back and forward. Yeah, unfortunately that's not what it was. Unfortunately that's not what it was in the slightest, and I am glad that this is now just a book that can be shared and be out there, and I'm glad nothing came of it. And I actually had this conversation with my wife last night, because we watched a programme where a child was abused, and she was talking about her thoughts and feelings. I said, nobody wins, nobody wins, that's the thing. So somebody abuses one of my girls, and my first instinct is they're going to die, I'm going to cut his fucking head off, that's it. You're never going to find him if you do. Fuck it, whatever, I've done what I've done, I've protected further people, I've protected my daughter. And you look at it logically, initially that mindset makes sense, and then take 10 minutes to think about it. Does it really? Yes, you've prevented him hurting anybody else. Yes, it probably feels great to get rid of that son of a bitch, but you've ruined your relationship with your daughter. You don't have one anymore. Your daughter's still damaged, if not more so, because now her dad's a killer. And then you've got to live with whatever repercussions are thrown at you, legally or otherwise. The flip side of that is you do nothing. Is that the go-to? So I'm then supposed to be taken care of, holding, making sure my daughter's okay, and what? Do nothing about it? No, it's ridiculous. Something would be done about it. But what is a different matter? I don't know. It's so hard to think about these things. And people have said to me, oh man, how you survived, I don't know. If my father had killed my mother, I'd have killed him. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. Until you've been in that position, you don't know. What's more, I was a child, so you remove any sense of responsibility at that point. However, this next chapter, maybe even the one after it, kind of delves into that. Because there's 3 points in my life where I was really, really low, and this is one of them. So we're going to hit this, knock this out, and then I can go out and pick the kids up. We come back, have a great time, and then the older one's in extra lessons because she's going for 11 plus. So she might end up going to grammar school. She will be the ultimate daily. But I don't know yet. We'll see what happens. But I'm so proud of both of them. They're awesome. Right, let's knock this next chapter out and see what happens. This isn't going to be easy to read, but then when is it ever fucking easy to read? When it's actually real. So let's see. Chapter 6, Checkmate. Back at school, I'd fit in easily again with my circle of friends. Cap and Keel had been amazing and totally understood when I said I wanted to stay out of trouble for a while. I needed time to sort my shit out, and that just meant keeping a low profile for a while. I'd walked downstairs expecting my brew and smoke when I saw George was lay on the floor in front of the sofa. It was strange. He had his head leaning against it and his legs out in front of him. The table was set ready for breakfast, his arms were across his chest like my granddad used to be when he was sleeping. This was totally not like George. He was always up with a brew and a smile. I went from 0 to 90 in less than 2 seconds as images of my granddad slamming into the floor went through my head. George, George, I said, prodding his shoulder. He turned and rubbed his eyes. You okay? Breathing okay? I asked him. Yeah, I was sleeping, lad, he said. You alright? He added, as I stood up and walked out the back door. I ignored him and lit up a smoke on the bench. George followed and sat down beside me. We were both sat with our forearms on our knees, leaning forward, looking at the garden. I'm alright, lad. Relax, he said. I gave it a few seconds, thinking of what to say. Then I just blurted out. I thought... Well, it doesn't matter what I thought. I told him, pushing images of Alan out of my head. Again, and realising I actually really cared about George. I'd gone to Knutsford and got lost, so I called Stephanie for directions, but she insisted she'd pick me up. It was nice, because then she took me shopping to register for my 4th doctor's in 14 years. I was pissed that social services were paying for my clothes again, so I'd act like I owed them something, like Brenda had. But a part of me knew Stephanie and George were not like that, and hell, if they could get something back from the social for providing for me, then fuck, why not? Who was I to argue? Have you ever thought of adopting? I asked her as she walked past another rail of socks. What a curious question, she said. Yeah, we've thought about it in the past, she added. What stopped you? I asked, feeling slightly intrusive, but all the more intrigued. Well, it's a long process, and then there's not knowing if the child would be a match. We wanted to, though, she confided. You'd make great parents. Would you ever consider it again, say, now? I let it hang there like a guillotine waiting to fall. Oh heavens, no, we're way too old now, she said. I'd heard enough. She was polite, but I got it. Nobody wanted me. Why would a decent family want me? We love having you here. You can stay as long as you like, she said. I just nodded. I inspected a pair of socks that I would never buy. And you and George seem to be getting on really well, she added. Yeah, he's cool, I said, leaving the socks for some other kid to have. When we got home, I asked for a paper and a pen. I needed to make a list, but my head wasn't clear. I drew graphic pictures of people killed instead, and burnt the lot at the bottom of the garden. I knew I wasn't right, but I wasn't quite sure what was wrong either. Usually the art therapy stuff helped, but not this time. Pictures wouldn't solve anything. A new girl was coming to stay. Her name was Carla. She was a little younger than me. I only knew because Stephanie had asked me to be as nice as she was new. I had no interest in speaking to anyone really. I was halfway through ignoring my homework and pretending I was living in the forest at Winsford when there was a knock at my door. I knew it wasn't Stephanie or George, so I did the polite thing and I ignored it. Perhaps she'd go away, but she didn't. Hello? I heard her call loud enough that I had to answer it. That hello seemed to say, I know you're in there, I know you're ignoring me, but we both know you're too polite to ignore me if I say hello, because it will be too much hassle to explain if I go and get the carers, because I'm worried about you, so just open the damn door already. I opened the door and a little pale face with dark hair looked at me from behind a big bag. Hi, I'm Carla. I'm new here. Look, I could get in trouble. Can I trust you? She asked me. Depends. What is it? I replied, as she pulled 2 bottles of vodka from her bag. I need to get rid of these. My dad owns a pub and I used to work there with him. Can you get rid of them? She asked me. I laughed. Hell yeah. What do you want for them? I said. Nothing, just get rid of them, she whispered. She pulled another bag from her room. And these, she added, passing me a bottle of gin, a bottle of dark rum, and a bottle of brandy. Thanks, I owe you one, she said, disappearing behind her bedroom door. I knew just the way to say thanks to Keel and Cap for all of their help. Keel and Cap were waiting for me at 8 AM as arranged. However, when the lads discovered beer was involved, a few others turned up. I didn't even know them. Stoppy couldn't make it because he was working, but Cap, Keel, Lee the comedian, Simon, a little pale lad who was really thin and looked like a matchstick dipped in ink on account of his jet black hair. We called him Woody. Michael and my friend Fordy, whose mum was dead too, all turned up, as did Richard I played rugby with. We all went over to the fields behind the school and tried a drink. I soon discovered that gin was vile. I was 15. My first taste of drink had been Lamb's Navy rum at Rachel's with Gilbert. Gilbert had downed his, and then looked at me. I downed mine, and we did the same. Okay, I'm just going to level with people here. Not happy about this one. But I'm 28 minutes in. The error has been made, found, and I will resolve it. Wenzel is Gilbert. Neither are his real name. He went through 2 name changes in this book. Rachel is his girlfriend. So I'm going to reread that. I do believe it's just hopefully this chapter that is all out of whack. The information is accurate, sorry, the names that have been changed. As time went on, so did the drinking, and my hands became numb. That's what I noticed first anyway. I figured it was because Wenzel and I were making shots. They was making snide comments about his girlfriend and tapping the stone wall beside the fireplace. I was tapping it with my fist, and found it strange how usually the pain would help me ignore him. However, I could feel nothing, even though my hand was red. I decided if I could make him laugh, I'd distract him from being abusive to his girlfriend. I slid off the chair and got into my green sleeping bag. I'm a caterpillar, I said over and over, rolling around on the floor like an idiot. His girlfriend found it hilarious and creased up. Wenzel wasn't amused, but it lightened the atmosphere, and he stopped having a go at her. The good memories stung, so I downed another 2 mouthfuls of rum, and then later, as the memory was from the school I'd downed some gin. Yuck, need something, I said. Lemonade or Dr. Pepper? Keel asked, pulling 2 bottles from his bag, as I remembered the previous memory. I gave him the "you're a hero" nod of respect, and he got to work mixing all the drinks into 2 pop bottles. How he managed it, I don't know, but we ended up passing around 2 very dangerous mixtures. Then we headed to the town centre where we stole or bought ourselves some lunch, by which time we were all either too tipsy or too wasted. Keel managed to knock over a stand outside Greg's, which had a board on complete with cakes and donuts. We picked him up and did a runner, at which point Keel could suddenly walk absolutely fine, and we saw an old lady looking through her shopping, leaning forwards with a cigarette in her mouth. Keel took the lit cigarette and said thanks, and immediately placed it in his mouth and carried on walking. I was gobsmacked, but turned to look at the woman who was so stunned she hadn't even moved from her bent over position, complete with pursed lips and everything. I cracked up laughing. As cruel as it was, it remains one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It's how we were. One of the lads was eyeing a car and got to talking about car badges being worth quite a bit. I didn't know. I had no interest in cars, nor did I want to drive. I didn't know where today was going to take me, let alone years down the line. We ended up in a shop which sold tools, so we nicked a few and headed back to the multi-storey car park. We took anything we could from Mercedes badges to Skodas. One lad even came back with a wing mirror. How he got it removed I don't know. It wasn't long before we heard shouting and legged it to the top floor. Keel was very drunk by this time and had taken to lying on the floor and waving his arms around like he was making snow angels, despite it being a sunny day. "This I'll never forget, man," he shouted, laughing and wiggling around. I was drunk too. I jumped up on the corner of the railing above Keel. I wasn't usually a fan of heights, but the combination of drink and lack of care about my safety meant I wasn't worried. If I fell, that was the end of any fear then. "No, mate, this you never forget," I said. I don't know why the hell I did this to this day. I unzipped my trousers and removed my member, where I proceeded to piss all over him from a great height. Why I did it, I don't know. It seemed funny at the time, but was a pretty stupid thing to do. Keel just carried on making sun angels and shouted, "It's raining!" I jumped down next to Lee, as I could see he wanted to talk to me. "What if they tell the school?" he said. He had a point, as half of them were in school uniform. "No problem," I told him. "We go back to school and act normal. If anyone's seen, then it can't have been us, can it? We were at school the whole time," I added. It was in no way a genius plan, but it was all part of the seemingly great idea at the time mentality. We sat outside school, passing the bottles around until they'd almost gone. I knew I had maths with Mrs. Lorne. Louise would be in lesson, as would Fordy, who was tipsy but not drunk. I thought I was fine, so said I'd take half the badges, and Lee would take the other half because he had an innocent face. He was never stopped by anybody, ever. I kind of envied him in that way. I only had to walk into a shop and the security guards were looking at me like I'd stolen something. I could almost feel them knowing I was a care kid. Lee and I would return the badges to their rightful owners after school. It would be fine. What could go wrong? As soon as I got into the hall, a teacher collared me. At the same time, the warm air and large amounts of alcohol hit me, and I swayed a little as the hall span. "What's this?" the male teacher said, taking my fags from my shirt. "Cigarettes, sir," I said, cracking up. "Can have one if you give 'em back," I said, leaning on the wall laughing. "Have you been drinking?" he asked me. I stood bolt upright. "Me, sir, no, sir." Then I burst out laughing again. It was involuntary. I'd given him the best salute I could muster, as though I really was in the army and had no worries. The best part about this, I'm actually sat here now in a military jumper. I have never been in the military in my life. It's just cold and a really comfy, big, thick military jumper. God, this is ridiculous. I've not changed one little bit. Well, maybe I have. Not in that way, though. "Wait here," he said as he disappeared around the corner, and at the end of the corridor, my smokes disappeared with him. I didn't know much, but I knew that firstly I was in the shit, and secondly I was definitely not waiting there for it to come and bite me in the arse. I did the first thing that entered my head. "Inform the others!" my mind screamed. I had to warn them. I ran down the hall, bumping into the wall numerous times, and scrambled for the stairs. My coat with the badges in was banging into the railings on the way up, and I stopped at the top to catch my breath. "Keep going!" my mind screamed. "Have to tell Fordy!" I knew Fordy knew the drill. His mum was dead too. He'd understand. He'd know what to do. just in case it wasn't blatantly fucking obvious. I had a lot of respect for 40, bless him. I flung the math room door open and shouted, 40, they're on to us, we gotta run. The room was full of students, all sat waiting for Mrs. Lorne, who I presumed was late, because she usually was. I put my coat on the peg behind the door and wobbled over to his desk. You okay? He asked as my head landed on his desk, and I stayed there looking up at him sideways. Nah, I'm fucked. They know about the drink. I had to tell you. Leg it! Tracie, wait outside, Mrs. Lorne said from behind me. Oh, fuck off, you fat cow, I said just as Mr. Forth and Mr. James entered the doorway. I tried dragging 40 out of the chair, but he was a big lad, and he was having none of it. I stood no chance. Come on, run, I ordered, as I pulled on his shirt and fell over time and time again. I decided after the fourth attempt I was on my own, and ran at Mr. Forth and Mr. James full pelt. I landed flat on my face about 2 feet in front of them. It's funny looking back. My sincere apologies to Miss Lorne, and my sincere apologies to Mr. Forth, because I know what comes later in the chapter. Yeah, so here we go. I walked up our chair with a very straight face to Mr. Forth, sat less than a foot in front of me. I was in a small room I didn't know existed downstairs by the entrance. My coat was on the back of my chair and my school bag was beside me. I didn't know if either had been searched, so I had to play dumb and presume they hadn't. I tried to sit up and look around, but kept sliding down and almost falling off before Mr. Forth sat me back up. Fuck off, don't touch me! I was screaming, half dead from mind to toe. Drink this, he said, handing me a plastic container filled with water. No, feel sick, fuck off, I told him. I know, it will make you feel better, he said gently. And then it happened. I didn't decide it to. I didn't want it to. But it did. You don't know shit, he killed her, he killed my mum, I shot out. Murderer, 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 dead, dead, dead. I went on, all dead, every single one, dead, dead, dead. What are you talking about, he asked me with honesty and intrigue. Sitting me back up again on the chair. I tried eyeballing him, but I fell off the chair. He picked me up as 2 ambulance men came in and they checked my eyes. Fuck off, I'm fine, don't touch me, fucker, I'll kill you, I stormed as they grabbed and turned my head to check I was okay. He'll be fine, but he'll have a head of a headache. He's close, but keep him hydrated. His mate's going to need the pump though, he said. I swung my head back around to the 2 large figures in the doorway. You're not my dad? I asked. It was as much as a surprise as it was a question. No son, we're not, one of the men said. He had a gentle voice. Where's Keel? I asked him. Keel's going to the hospital to be stomach pumped. If you're lucky, he'll be alright, he said and left. Keel's dead? Asked Mr. Forth. No, not dead, but he's drunk a lot. What happened? I need to know everything to be able to help him. I could tell he was serious. I was so drunk I took him literally. So I started with when my nan died, and then I told him everything up to me being in care. So she lay down in front of me. My mum's mum, who's my nan, and now she's dead. Dead, 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 sick everywhere, onions, yuck. Until I got on to the end, and he asked me, so are you happy where you are now? He seemed upset, but he was holding it together well. I had a world of respect for him, but I didn't know how to show it, let alone express it. No! They won't adopt me. They don't care. Nobody does. I'm going quiet now. And I refused to speak until George picked me up from the waiting room. Come on, he said, as I walked 3 steps behind him into the car. Don't be angry, I said with my head down. I'm not angry, he said honestly. Be angry, I said, getting into the car where he helped me fasten the seatbelt. Him not being angry was actually hurting more. Why would you do this to yourself? We thought you were happy, he asked me. I was in the back seat trying to lie down, but the seatbelt prevented it. I'm sorry, hit me, I said. Please? I'm not going to hit you, George said, concentrating on the driving. Please hit me, I've been bad. I'm sorry. You can push me into a wall. He did. I said. Suddenly I was back at Wenzel's in my head. Get some rest, George said. We'll talk tomorrow. I'm sorry, just hit me. No mind games, not that from you. I begged on off all the way home. Stephanie was in the hall when I returned. She looked worried sick. I felt terrible. I'd caused this, I'd hurt them. I went back to bed without a smoke. I awoke and replayed the previous day in my head. I'd gone to school and got drunk. Okay, that was dumb. Then we went on the town and... oh God, I was thieving. And then, did we nick a smoke off a little old lady? Why did I find this funny? Then I pissed on Keel. Why did I do that? What an idiot. Keel got a stomach pump whilst I put all the blame on the car badges on Lee. It hit me like a tidal wave. I told them Lee brought the drink in, and he asked me to save some car badges he'd nicked because he felt tipsy and I didn't want to get caught with them. Couldn't believe the lie I'd told. The rest was not nice and was really dumb, but I was upset more than anything that I'd worried Stephanie and George. More upset that I'd lied. I'd done some stupid things, but I'd already lied where I'd had to before, and I'd always to protect myself or my friends. I wasn't a grass, and this had made me totally ashamed of myself. I came downstairs in the morning ashamed and embarrassed. Stephanie and George only asked if I'd had anything other than drink. I said no, which was true, and waited for the roasting I deserved. Let's forget about it then. Remember, if you do this again, you're only hurting yourself, he said. He was right and I knew it. Okay, I'm sorry. I really am, I said, going to school. Lee wasn't in for days. Then eventually he was in the changing room. Whilst everyone else was getting ready to play rugby, he was slumped against the side with his jogging bottoms on and a school shirt. His leg was bandaged up from just below the knee all the way up his thigh. 32 stitches, Lee said, giving me a fake smile. I was reading his eyes. Came off my bike and hit a curb, he added with a big grin, although his eyes looked sad. I'm sorry, I said, knowing I'd told Mr. Forth that everything was Lee's fault. It's okay, I'll get a huge payout from the council soon, he lied. Sure, I said, knowing his lie just as easily as one I'd have told myself. His mum must have done him some real damage to give him 32 stitches. I felt like shit. He showed me the scar weeks later. It was an inch wide. And so, I think now, I've got like 5 minutes before I've got to go, so I think now, how would I be if that was one of my girls? How would I be if either of my children were in the back of a car begging to be hit because that's the only way they translated somebody being unhappy with them and taking some sort of parental responsibility to punish them or guide them in life? That was the only interpretation they had of that being normal. I wasn't fucking normal for a minute. My girls are 9 and 5, and yes, they might be spoiled rotten to some degree, but I tell you what, they're both doing really, really bloody well in school, and neither of them ever had a hand laid on them by me or by anybody else, and God help the motherfucker who touches them. So you don't need to do things that way. You really don't. And there I was, what, 15, if that? Probably a little bit younger. Yeah, a little bit younger. Not by much though. So between 14 and a half and 15 and a half, because I was with a woman when I was 15 and a half. I'm just about to meet her. So yeah, you think you got an idea about doing a book? Go and do the book. There's no better therapy in the world. Whether that's reliving it, re-going over it, and hopefully use it to assist, aid, or explain to somebody else, or whether that's going over it from time to time just to be able to deal with it better, or whether in this case it's to find you found a fucking edit that you need to fix and go back and redo that. Go and review the book, review it as if it's been done perfectly, and then I'll redo this one and get it back out there in the next 2 days in a better formatted copy. I missed a couple of the name changes, and they've been changed. None of them are the real names anyway, so that's not a problem. There's no implication there, but I'd like it to be fluid all the way through. I'd like them to be all Wenzels or all Gilberts. It doesn't matter which, but personally I've stuck with Wenzel through the beginning, so I'll stick with Wenzel through all the others. Obviously that was a difficult time, and when I've edited that one I've just missed it. And when 2 other people have edited it, they've just missed it as well, which also tells me if you go the self-publishing route, don't trust everybody to go and do everything they say they're going to do. They might be great people, they might have great intentions, but even friends and relatives that I've got that are really close to, that I think the absolute world of, can't read all of these books. They read several chapters and then go, you know what, mate, I know you, and I don't associate you with any of the stuff that you've done in the past or any of the stuff that's been done to you, and therefore reading it is just too difficult for them. So expect that. If you're doing an autobiography, expect it. It is 3 o'clock here, and I've got to go and pick up my girls. They're going to look awesome, because they're still, well, they're not going to look awesome. They're going to look like they did look awesome this morning. Their hair's going to be a mess when they come out of school. But still, we're probably going to play board games or whatever until the oldest comes back. Peppa Pig Monopoly, no doubt. Something along those lines. You know, they have no clue about any of this. My name's Tracie Daily. Take care of yourselves and the children. Till next time, bye bye.